G'day, or in my case, good morning. 21st of February 2026. Thought I'll do another episode of Message of Hope before I head off to the caravan show. I love caravans. Okay, can I ask you something? Who taught you about money? I mean, really taught you. Not just the mechanics of counting change or balancing a checkbook, but the deeper stuff, the attitude stuff, which is really important. I mean, the why behind the what, right? Who sat down and said, here's how money works. Here's what it can do to you if you're not careful. Here's what God says about it. Very critical about that. For most of us, the honest answer is, well, nobody. I want to see if I can go to a quiet street. Hold on. Yeah, let me walk across first. Yeah, this is a very popular street, close to the railway, but lots of cafes. Being Saturday morning, people are out there having breakfast with their friends and family. All right. Where was I? Yes. Well, we figured it out the hard way, didn't we? Oh, I know, I did. Through debt we shouldn't have accumulated. Through risk we were too afraid to take. And through years of doing something that felt responsible, but really wasn't moving us forward, right? It didn't move the needle at all. Hey, I'll put my hands up here. I'm guilty. But having said that, I was a good saver from early on. Disciplined, consistent and careful. Felt pretty good about myself actually. And for years, my idea was putting my savings into a term deposit, because that's all I knew in that little world, and watching the interest trickle in, very small amount, okay? Because it felt safe, I felt I was being responsible, I felt like I was doing the right thing. You guys probably can guess right now, right? What I didn't understand was that safe and wise aren't always the same thing. No siree. Well, for those of you watching from other countries, term deposit you might be familiar with. A term deposit isn't a wealth building vehicle. It turns out to be just a parking spot. Found out a little bit too late. And while I was busy feeling responsible and working, inflation was quickly eating the real value of everything I carefully set aside. Yes, I wasn't losing money on paper, but I wasn't really gaining ground either. Could have put better use, right? Yeah. Well, nobody taught me that. I had to discover it slowly and somewhat painfully on my own. And that's my point today. Because most of our kids are going to make the same journey unless we decide to do something about it. Now, I know what some parents think. That's what school is for. I have a different train of thought. Let the teachers handle it, they say. And look, I don't want to be unfair to teachers. They do carry an enormous load, especially this day and age. Whew. But here's the reality. What most schools teach about money is just theory, I think. Facts and figures. Put on a comment if you want to challenge that. That's fine. Let's get something going here. They just teach you how interest is calculated, what a budget looks like on paper. They're useful foundations, but nowhere near sufficient, I feel. And frankly, teachers aren't equipped to do further than that. Yeah, not because they're not good at their job, but because nobody probably taught them either. That's my best guess. So, the responsibility lands with us parents. I'm a parent. And that's actually not a burden, it's an extraordinary opportunity if you're prepared to look at it that way. And I'll tell you from Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, and this is what it says: train up a child in a way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, that particular verse, granted, is not specifically talking about money management. But it is a really good principle, and I think God wants us to honor that. Okay? So I think that verse is about character formation. It's about habits and values and instincts we build into our children when they're young enough to receive them. So start when they're very young. It's a lot easier. Take it from me, okay? I'm glad I did it properly, I feel. And money, well, how we earn it, save it, invest it, give it, is one of the most important character revealing subject there is. Not to be ignored at all. Okay, so it begs the question, what does good education actually look like for a child? It starts with earning, right? Not just receiving. There's a profound difference between pocket money handed over, because it's salary and money connected to effort and contribution. Now, when a child earns something, they treat it differently, I hope. They understand instinctively that money represents something. It represents the time, energy, and work that they put in. Let that sink in for them in there. That lesson alone is worth more than any economics class. How true that is. Now we're going to talk about saving. It's not just accumulating, but saving with a purpose. Right? That gives a real power, real impromptu for you to do it. So saving towards something specific. Teaching a child to delay gratification, to want something, wait for it. Work towards it. Yeah, this is one of the most countercultural things you can do in a world that runs entirely on buy now, pay later. So be careful. Then investing. And here's where I will gently push parents further than they're comfortable going. Don't let your children believe that a savings account is a destination. Yes, we need savings, but we have to do furthermore, okay? Look at the parable where Jesus talked about the 10 talents. And by the way, the talents, I've been told from research, 1 talent equals to 15 years of labor. Let that sink in. Now back to the savings. Yes, introduce them early to the idea that money can work, that wisely placed it can grow, that there is a difference between parking money and deploying it. You don't need to make it complicated, but plant the seed early, very early. And this is the one that changes everything, giving. This is a concept you need to drill that into your kids. Be generous, okay? Teach them to give before they feel they have enough to give. Because here's what I've discovered. Nobody ever feels they have enough to give, right? That's the general consensus I see. Now, the habit of generosity has to be built when we're young enough to not have fully convincing excuses yet. Oh no, I've got other things to pay off. My kids are sick. Yeah, I get it. Okay, well, here's what we're really doing when we teach our kids these 4 things: to earn, save, invest, and give. Are you listening? We're not just making them financially competent. Super important in their life. We're forming their hearts towards stewardship, which is what God wants us. Toward the understanding that what they have isn't ultimately theirs. It's been placed in their hands by a God who is watching with great interest what they do with it. And unless you're in a Christian school, that's not a school subject. Even then, I argue whether they do teach it in a Christian school. Okay? That's a conversation that happens at dinner table, happens in a car, whenever you go shopping, when they're standing there with their own money deciding whether to spend it or save it. And guess what? It starts with us deciding this matters enough to teach our children, and hopefully they'll teach their children. All right, that's a lot of food for thought today. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.